The grand hall of the Galactic Alliance was packed today. Hundreds of faces from across the planets gathered, scales gleaming, fur rippling, or skin glowing softly in the ambient light. A heavy silence, punctuated by murmurs of discontent, filled the solemn occasion. On the podium, an old warrior slowly made his way to the microphone. His battle-worn armor was chipped and scarred, deep marks crisscrossing his crimson skin. One of his compound eyes was marred by a jagged line, a testament to countless wars. He was Colonel Zargon, a name once legendary, now slandered by fools. Zargon stepped deliberately to the mic, his old armored joints creaking. He swept his weary gaze across the crowd, settling on a group of young officers. Their mocking words still echoed in his mind. Humans are just a broken species. They boast about Kepler 442b, but they only bogged us down. What a disgrace! Zargon's old hand tightened into a fist. These familiar, baseless accusations. His voice, raspy but resonant, filled the hall, thick with pain and an undeniable truth. You think you understand war? You've read the books, memorized the rules that civilized species follow? You believe war has honor and order? He paused, letting the harsh question hang in the air. Today, I will tell you about humans. After today, you will understand that everything you thought you knew about war was an illusion. A young officer with light blue skin tentatively raised her hand. Sir, humans are our allies now. Why should we fear them? Zargon's damaged eyes seemed to fix on her. Fear them, young one. You should respect them. The difference between fear and respect is understanding. Allow me to tell you about Kepler 442b.
The colonel cleared his throat, his translator buzzing. 20 years ago, the Vuldarian Dominion reigned supreme across half the galaxy. Our fleet was vast, our weapons unparalleled, and we believed ourselves invincible. Kepler 442b was merely a small human mining outpost on the edge of our territory, home to some 40,000 ordinary inhabitants. He activated a large display, showing an image of a lush green planet. The Vuldarian Dominion decided to take Kepler 442b as a warning to Earth. We sent 12,000 elite warriors, dozens of warships, enough firepower to obliterate a small moon. Everyone presumed this conquest would be effortless. The cadets leaned forward, intrigued. Many had never encountered this battle in their official histories. The colony's commander was a mining engineer, not a soldier, named Danny Brooks, Zargon continued, his voice heavy with a grim memory. When the Vuldarian fleet arrived, we expected his immediate surrender. Instead, Brooks sent a message, one that still chills me to the core when I recall it. Zargon paused for a moment. Brooks said, "This is human territory. You are not welcome here. Leave now, or we will make you leave." Our admiral laughed. 40,000 miners and farmers against 12,000 seasoned warriors? He saw it as a cheap jest. The Colonel Zargon began to pace slowly across the platform. The siege commenced the next day. We anticipated its end in mere hours. It dragged on for 2 months, transforming every passing moment into an inferno. A green-scaled Rex cadet stammered, How is that possible, sir? The figures, They defy logic." "That is what all of us thought. But humans do not reason as other species do. While we meticulously established siege positions, adhering to every military protocol, the humans engaged in acts utterly insane."
The screen shifted, displaying the colony's interior. What were once mining tools and equipment had been repurposed into crude weapons. Plasma cutters became rifles. Industrial explosives became bombs. Even the artificial gravity system was transformed into a deadly trap. "Danny Brooks and his people weaponized everything," Zagon said, his voice dropping to a whisper. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how they fought. "When our soldiers breached the outer halls," Zargon continued, his eyes glinting with a strange intensity, "they found humans waking in the corridors. These humans had endured hours of vacuum exposure, their skin frozen, their lungs collapsed. By all rights, they should have been dead." A few cadets visibly winced. "Yet," Zargon stated, his voice laced with lingering awe, "they persisted. One human woman, a cook named Betty Walsh, had both legs crushed by debris. She crawled through the ventilation system for 3 days, setting traps and killing our soldiers with kitchen knives." The display showed the colony's escalating destruction. Sections blown open, walls collapsed, atmosphere leaking into space. "We cut their power, they generated their own. We poisoned their water supply, they recycled their own urine and sweat. We blocked their food shipments, they consumed their dead." Several cadets gasped in disgust. "Yes, it appalled us too. In our cultures, there are certain acts we simply do not commit, even in war." Humans knew no such limits when defending their home. The colonel stopped pacing, facing his audience directly. "After 6 weeks, we had lost 3,000 soldiers. The humans had lost half their numbers. Any other species would have surrendered. Instead, Danny Brooks sent another message. He declared, 'We're just getting started.'" A new image appeared on the screen, showing the colony's final desperate stand. Only about 50 humans remained. They were wounded, sick, and dwindling in ammunition. Commander Brooks had lost his left arm and was slowly succumbing to radiation poisoning. The Vuldarian admiral resolved to end it with one final assault. The vast hall fell utterly silent. Even the soft hum of the air recyclers seemed deafening. 2,000 Vuldarian soldiers stormed the command center, Zargon recounted. They found Brooks sitting in his chair, barely conscious. He looked up at our admiral and smiled. Then he pressed a button. The display showed a massive explosion. Brooks had converted the station's fusion reactor into a bomb. He extinguished himself, the remaining humans, and 1,500 of our soldiers in one catastrophic instant. The explosion's brilliance was visible from 3 star systems away. Zargon let the silence linger for a long moment before continuing. The Vuldarian admiral survived, but he was forever changed. He later confessed that Brooks's smile haunted his dreams.
A human, dying and defeated, had smiled at him as if claiming a great victory. A young, green-scaled cadet nervously spoke up. "But, sir, they all perished. How is that winning?" Zargon's compound eyes seemed to shimmer in the light. "Because the tale of Kepler 442b spread throughout the galaxy. Every species learned what 40,000 humans could achieve when driven to the edge. The Vuldarian Dominion began to dread attacking human colonies. Other species sought human military counsel. The very balance of power in the galaxy began to shift." The old warrior moved back to the center of the platform. "That is why you must grasp the nature of humans. They do not fight to win battles. They fight to win wars. They do not count the cost to themselves. They measure only the toll on their enemies. When a human commits to fight, they have already embraced death. That makes them the most formidable warriors in the galaxy." Zargon looked around the room at the young faces staring back at him. "Tomorrow I will tell you about Lieutenant Elias Thorne and his unit. You will learn how humans hunt in packs and why that terrorizes every military commander who has faced them." The colonel turned off the holographic display. "Dismissed. Ponder what you have learned today. Remember that these humans are now our allies. Be thankful for that truth." As the cadets filed out, many were quiet and reflective. They had come expecting military history, but instead they had encountered the raw essence of humanity. Some would never view their human classmates the same way again. Zargon remained on the platform, watching the young beings depart. In a few years, many would serve alongside humans in the Galactic Defense Forces. He hoped his stories would foster a deeper understanding of their allies. More importantly, he prayed they would never confront humans as adversaries. The old warrior gathered his materials, preparing for tomorrow's account, another lesson about the species that had forever altered warfare. As he walked toward the door, Zargon reflected on the irony of his fate. Once their enemy, now their mentor. Humans had taught him that even in war, redemption was possible. The next day, Zargon returned to the Grand Hall. The same young cadets filled their seats, yet a palpable change permeated the air. They were quieter, more solemn. Word of yesterday's story had spread through the academy, leading some human cadets to face difficult questions from their alien peers. Zargon sensed the shift immediately. Good, he thought. They are beginning to comprehend that war is not a game played by rules. Yesterday, I recounted the tale of Commander Brooks and Kepler 442b, the old warrior began. Today, I will tell you about Lieutenant Elias Thorne and why humans are the galaxy's most dangerous hunters. A cadet with purple fur raised her hand. "Sir, humans evolved from prey animals, not predators. How can they be dangerous hunters?" Zargon's translator clicked as he prepared his answer. "That is precisely what makes them so dangerous. Prey animals that survive become the most cunning creatures on their world. They learn to think like their enemies. They learn to exploit every advantage, no matter how trivial." The veteran activated his holographic display. This time, it showed a jungle planet, shrouded in thick trees and heavy mist. This is Valerius Prime, a world bordering human and Vuldarian space. The jungle covers most of the planet. Visibility rarely exceeds 50 meters, a perfect realm for ambush. Zargon moved closer to his audience. I served there as an intelligence officer for the Vuldarian forces. We deployed 3,000 soldiers to secure the planet. The humans had sent only one small unit, 12 individuals, led by Lieutenant Elias Thorne. The hologram zoomed in on a small human man with dark hair and calm eyes. He appeared ordinary, unremarkable. Several cadets seemed perplexed by his unassuming appearance. Thorne was a reconnaissance specialist, Zargon explained. His mission was to gather information and avoid engagement. But humans seldom conform to expectations. The display changed to show the jungle from an aerial perspective. Red dots marked Vuldarian positions, blue dots indicated the supposed human locations. For the first week, everything proceeded as planned. Our forces secured landing zones and established bases. We detected the human unit moving through the jungle, steering clear of our patrols. Our commanders were pleased, assuming the humans were adhering to proper procedure. The old warrior paused, his compound eyes reflecting the display's light. Then, our soldiers began to vanish. A young cadet with silver skin spoke up nervously. "Vanish, sir? Not killed?" "Vanished," Zargon replied. Guards were found unconscious at their posts. Patrol units returned with missing members who had no recollection of what befell their comrades. Equipment disappeared from secured areas. It felt like battling phantoms. The hologram depicted a series of incidents across the jungle. Soldiers found bound to trees, vehicles discovered with their engines meticulously removed, communication equipment clogged with mud and insects. "Initially, we attributed it to the jungle itself," Zargon said. "Perhaps dangerous creatures or unforeseen natural hazards. But then, the sounds began." Several cadets leaned forward, captivated despite their apprehension. "Every night we heard human children singing lullabies through our communication systems. The songs were sweet, innocent, yet hearing them in a combat zone was utterly terrifying. Our soldiers struggled to sleep. Some refused to patrol after dusk." Zargon's voice grew quieter. "Then we uncovered recordings, hidden throughout our camps. Not just children singing, but families talking, people laughing, everyday human conversations. Thorne and his team had somehow captured thousands of hours of normal human life. The display showed small devices concealed in trees, beneath rocks, and inside equipment. These recordings played at random intervals, day and night. Our soldiers never knew when they might hear a human baby crying or a woman humming a tune. It burrowed into their minds. A cadet with tentacles asked, "Why was that so effective, sir?" "Because most species in the galaxy are social creatures. We have families, we nurture our young, we value life. Hearing those human voices reminded our soldiers that we were fighting people with families, not monsters. It caused them to hesitate in combat, and hesitation means death." The hologram shifted to a Vuldarian atoll navigating the jungle. The soldiers appeared nervous, constantly scanning their surroundings. But the psychological warfare was merely the prelude, Zargon continued. Thorn's true genius lay in understanding how other species think. He studied our patrol patterns, exposing our weaknesses. The display zoomed in on one of the missing soldiers. He was tied to a tree, unconscious but unharmed. My species, the Vorlock, possess excellent hearing but poor low-light vision. Thorn's team quickly exploited this. They approached our sentries during daylight, when visibility was high, using mirrors to reflect sunlight into our compound eyes. While we were blinded, they injected us with human sleep medicine. Zargon pointed to another incident on the display. The Goron species has a keen sense of smell, but becomes disoriented by certain chemical combinations. The humans concocted a scent from their own sweat and jungle plants that sickened and confused Goron soldiers. The old warrior began pacing across the platform. For each species in our force, Thorn discovered a distinct vulnerability. He turned our own biology against us, but even that was not the worst part. The cadets waited in silent anticipation. The worst part was their treatment of our captured soldiers, Zargon stated. They did not torture them or kill them. Instead, they tended their wounds, provided food and water, and conversed with them as friends. The hologram showed human soldiers sitting around a small fire with captured enemies, sharing meals and stories. Private Daniel Cooper, one of Thorn's men, spoke 7 different alien languages. He would spend hours talking with prisoners about their homes, their families, their hopes for the future. By the time we rescued our people, many of them no longer desired to fight.
A blue-scaled cadet looked perplexed. "Sir, that sounds like kindness, not warfare." Zargon's damaged eye seemed to bore into her. It was both. Thorn grasped that the most potent weapon against any sentient being is doubt. He compelled our soldiers to question their reasons for fighting. He made them perceive humans as individuals, not enemies. The display changed to show the final confrontation. A large contingent of Vuldarian soldiers surrounding a small clearing where the 12 humans waited. After 6 weeks, our commanders had had enough. They dispatched 500 soldiers to encircle Thorn's team. There was no escape. No clever stratagem that could save 12 humans from 500 adversaries. Zargon stopped pacing and faced his audience. Thorn knew he was trapped, so he performed an act that still plagues my nightmares. The hologram showed the human lieutenant standing in the clearing's center, holding a small device. He activated a beacon that summoned every dangerous predator on the planet to his location, Zargon explained. Then he and his team scaled the trees and waited. The display showed massive creatures emerging from the jungle, beings with claws and teeth and poisonous spines, all converging on the clearing where the humans had been. Our soldiers found themselves besieged by the planet's most formidable wildlife. In the ensuing chaos, Thorn and his team escaped, but not before he left us one final message. Zargon activated an audio recording. A woman's voice spoke calmly in perfect Vuldarian standard. "War is not about being the strongest or having the best weapons. War is about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves. Humans have been prey for millions of years. We know how predators think because we had to learn or die. Now we are both prey and predator, and that makes us something new, something you have never faced before."
The recording ceased, leaving the Grand Hall in profound silence. Thorn and his 12 soldiers held an entire planet against 3,000 enemies for 2 months, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through understanding the psychology of warfare better than anyone else in the galaxy. The old warrior surveyed the room, his gaze resting on the young faces. This is why humans are dangerous allies and terrifying enemies. They don't just fight with weapons. They fight with knowledge, with psychology, with an understanding of what motivates every species they encounter. Zargon turned off the holographic display. Tomorrow, I will tell you about Captain Mira Jensen and the defense of Neo-Detroit. You will learn why wounded humans become more dangerous, not less. As the cadets filed out, many appeared troubled. They had learned that warfare extended beyond tactics and technology. It involved comprehending the enemy's mind and turning their own thoughts against them. Several human cadets lingered, appearing uneasy. One approached Zargon. "Sir," the young human asked, "do you really think we're that scary?" Zargon studied the cadet with his compound eyes. The human looked so young, so innocent, just as Lieutenant Thorn had in his files. "Scary? No, young one. You are something far more dangerous than scary. You are unpredictable. And in war, unpredictability is the greatest weapon of all."
The third day arrived, and a heavy atmosphere pervaded the Grand Hall. Word of Zargon's stories had spread beyond the academy. Some alien cadets had contacted their families, posing questions about the human wars their parents preferred not to discuss. The human students in the class seemed quieter, more introspective about their own nature. Zargon entered the room and immediately sensed the change. Several seats were empty. Some cadets had requested transfers to other classes, claiming they could not serve alongside humans after hearing these accounts. The old warrior felt a familiar sadness. Fear often extinguished understanding before it could truly blossom. Today I will tell you about Captain Mira Jensen and the ground war on Valerius Prime, Zargon began without preamble. This story is more difficult to recount than the others, for I was not merely observing this battle, I was a part of it. The veteran activated his holographic display, showing a planet covered in gray cities and vast industrial complexes. Valerius Prime was humanity's most crucial manufacturing world. Millions of humans resided there, constructing ships and weapons for their expanding fleet. The Vuldarian Dominion believed that destroying this world would cripple human military production. A young cadet with golden scales raised her hand. "Sir, if you were fighting against the humans, how did you survive to tell us this story?" Zargon's compound eyes focused on her. "That is a very pertinent question. The answer will become clear as I relate what transpired." The display zoomed in on a city named Neo-Detroit. Towering buildings reached toward the sky, interconnected by bridges and transport tubes. I was a battalion commander in the Vuldarian ground forces. We landed 50,000 soldiers to seize the industrial centers. The humans had only 10,000 defenders, mostly factory workers with rudimentary military training. The hologram depicted heavily armored soldiers landing near the city. Captain Mira Jensen commanded the human defense. She was a logistics officer, someone who typically organized supply shipments and equipment repairs, not a combat soldier. Zargon paused, his translator clicking softly.
The initial day of fighting unfolded precisely as our generals anticipated. Our superior numbers and heavy armaments pushed the human defenders back. By evening, we controlled half the city. Our casualties were minimal. Victory appeared certain. The display showed the battle's progression, with red areas marking Vuldarian control spreading across the city map. That night, Captain Jensen transmitted a message to all human defenders. She stated, "This is our home. These are our families. They seek to take all we have built. We will not allow them." Simple words, yet they altered everything. The old warrior's voice grew quieter, laced with grim remembrance. The following morning we discovered the true meaning of human determination. The hologram shifted to show the second day of battle. This time, the red areas ceased expanding and began to contract. Our first indication of change came from Sergeant Major Vorlag, one of our field medics. He reported treating human soldiers who by all rights should have been dead from their wounds, yet continued to fight.
A cadet with purple tentacles spoke up nervously. "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean exactly that," Zargon replied. "A human soldier named Liam Stone had been shot through the chest with a plasma rifle. The wound should have killed him instantly. Instead, he used his own blood to mark enemy positions on the walls, then fought for 6 more hours before medical aid arrived." The display showed medical readings from the battle, heart rates, blood pressure, and pain levels that seemed impossible for any living creature to endure. Another human, Maria Sanchez, had both legs crushed when a building collapsed. She dragged herself 3 blocks through the rubble, using a broken piece of metal as a weapon to attack our soldiers from behind. When we found her, she was still conscious and still fighting. Several cadets looked uncomfortable. One with blue fur asked, "Sir, how is that possible? Pain is meant to halt further self-inflicted harm." Zargon nodded. "For most species, yes. Pain is a warning system, prompting us to cease before irreversible damage occurs. But humans possess an uncanny ability to disregard these warnings when something of greater importance is at stake." The hologram showed Captain Jensen herself coordinating the defense from a damaged command post. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, clearly broken. Captain Jensen was wounded in the first hour of the second day. A plasma blast severed the nerves in her arm and caused severe burns across her shoulder. Any other species would have been incapacitated by the pain. The display showed Jensen continuing to issue orders, using her good arm to operate communication equipment while medics attempted to treat her wounds. She refused medical evacuation. Instead, she had medics inject her with stimulants that would be lethal to most alien species. These drugs allowed her to function despite injuries that should have rendered her unconscious. The old warrior began pacing across the platform. But Captain Jensen was not the most unsettling example of human endurance that day. The hologram focused on a young human soldier lying motionless in a pile of debris. Private Alex Riley had been caught in an explosion that covered 60% of his body with third-degree burns. Our sensors registered no life signs. We classified him as deceased and moved on. Zargon stopped pacing and faced his audience. 3 hours later, Private Riley rose from that rubble and destroyed our ammunition depot with a stolen grenade launcher. The cadet stared in stunned silence as the display showed the explosion that crippled the Vuldarian advance. Riley was blind from his injuries. His skin was charred black,
His hair was gone, and parts of his uniform had melted into his flesh. He should have been dead. Instead, he had crawled 1/2 mile through the city, tracking the sound of our vehicles to find our supply depot. A green-scaled cadet raised her hand shakily. "Sir, what happened to him after that?" "He died," Zargon said simply, "but not until after he had single-handedly delayed our advance by an entire day. The ammunition he destroyed was crucial for our final assault. Without it, we were forced to await resupply." The hologram showed the battle extending into the 3rd day. By then, the human defensive positions resembled disaster zones, yet they stubbornly held.
By the 3rd day, we had learned to fear wounded humans more than healthy ones, Zargon admitted. A healthy human might hesitate, might seek alternatives to violence. A wounded human had already accepted death and fought with nothing left to lose. The display showed Captain Jensen on the 3rd day, her broken arm now in a crude sling, burn marks marring half her face, yet her eyes remained alert, utterly resolute. "That was when I made the decision that preserved my life," Zargon said. "I walked into the human command post under a flag of truce and requested to speak with Captain Jensen." The cadets leaned forward, surprised by this development. "I informed her that my soldiers were too terrified to continue fighting," Zargon explained. "They had witnessed humans battle through injuries that would fell any other species. They believed humans were supernatural beings, invincible." The hologram showed the 2 commanders meeting in the ruins of what was once a city hall. Captain Jensen looked at me with those human eyes, and I saw something I had never before encountered. Not hatred, not anger, but sadness. She was saddened that we had forced her people to become something they abhorred. The old warrior's voice grew softer. She told me, "We do not relish being monsters. We become monsters because sometimes that is the only way to protect what we love. If you cease trying to seize our home, we can cease being monsters." The display showed Vuldarian forces withdrawing from the planet. "I ordered my troops to retreat that day," Zargon said. "Not because we were militarily defeated, but because we finally comprehended what we were truly fighting. Humans do not simply endure pain and injury. They transmute suffering into strength, fear into fury, desperation into determination." Zargon turned off the holographic display and looked around the room. "Many of my fellow officers denounced me as a coward for retreating. They claimed I had been vanquished by a lesser force. They were wrong. I had learned the distinction between tactical withdrawal and strategic wisdom." A human cadet in the back row raised her hand. "Sir, what happened to Captain Jensen?" "She survived. She recovered from her injuries and continued to serve in the human military. Years later, when the war concluded and humans became our allies, she was instrumental in designing our current joint training programs." The old warrior gathered his materials. "Tomorrow, I will tell you about Admiral Calvin Thorne and the space battles around Jupiter. You will learn that humans are just as dangerous in the void of space as they are on solid ground." As the cadets filed out, Zargon noticed several stayed to assist their wounded classmates. A human cadet with a broken leg was being supported by 2 aliens who, days before, had feared him. Perhaps understanding could indeed grow from fear. The old warrior smiled to himself. Captain Jensen had been correct. Humans could cease being monsters when there was no longer a need. Yet the galaxy was safer knowing they could become monsters again if necessary.
On the fourth day, Zargon observed that more cadets had returned to his class. Word had spread not just of the terrifying stories, but of the profound lessons they contained. Some students who had left were now back, seated quietly, listening with newfound comprehension. The old warrior also noted another change. Human and alien cadets were now sitting together, conversing softly before class began. Yesterday's account of Captain Jensen had revealed that humans transformed into monsters only when compelled to protect something precious. This revelation seemed to lessen the aliens' fear and the humans' shame. Today I will tell you about Admiral Calvin Thorne and the battles in space around Jupiter, Zargon began. This story will teach you that humans are not bound by the same physical limitations as other species. The holographic display activated, showing the massive planet Jupiter with its swirling storms and numerous moons. Dozens of space stations orbited the giant planet, connected by streams of cargo ships and construction vessels. Jupiter was humanity's most crucial military shipyard, Sargon explained. Half of their fleet was constructed in the orbital facilities around this planet. The Voldarian Dominion knew that destroying these shipyards would cripple human space power for decades. A cadet with silver skin raised his hand. "Sir, space battles are fought with ships and weapons. How could individual humans make a difference?" Zargon's damaged eye seemed to glitter. "That is precisely what we believed. We were profoundly mistaken." The holographic display showed a massive Voldarian fleet approaching Jupiter. Hundreds of warships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready for battle. Admiral Thorne commanded the human defense fleet, Zargon continued. He possessed fewer ships than us, older weapons, and most of his crew were civilian shipyard workers. By every metric of military science, he should have suffered a swift defeat. The hologram zoomed in on the human flagship. It appeared smaller and less formidable than the surrounding Voldarian vessels. The first day of battle unfolded as anticipated. Our superior numbers and firepower began pushing the human fleet back. Several of their ships were destroyed, and many more were damaged. Admiral Thorne's forces retreated toward Jupiter's upper atmosphere. The display showed the tactical progression, with human ships falling back while enduring heavy damage. That night, our commander celebrated, Zargon admitted. We believed the humans were trapped against their own planet. The next morning, we would finish them and claim the shipyards. The old warrior paused, his translator clicking softly. What we discovered the next morning shattered everything we thought we knew about space warfare. The hologram shifted to show the dawn of the second day. Human ships were moving in patterns that seemed impossible. The humans had done something during the night that no other species had ever attempted. They had modified their own bodies for zero-gravity combat. Several cadets looked confused. A young alien with blue tentacles asked, "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean exactly that," Zargon replied. "Admiral Thorne's Marines had magnetic implants installed in their bones. Their inner ears were modified to prevent disorientation in zero gravity. Some even had their lungs altered to hold more oxygen. The display showed human soldiers floating through space between ships, moving with impossible grace and precision. But the most shocking modification was discovered when we captured one of their engineers, Zargon continued. Maria Price had been working outside her ship when we attacked. She had been in hard vacuum for over 10 minutes when our rescue team found her. The hologram focused on a human woman floating unconscious in space, her skin blue from oxygen deprivation. By all medical knowledge, she should have been dead, Zargon said. Hard vacuum extinguishes most species in less than 2 minutes. Yet, when we brought her aboard our medical ship, she was still alive. A green-scaled cadet spoke up nervously. "How is that possible, sir?" Human engineers had developed a technique they called vacuum walking, Zargon explained. They would hyperventilate before exposure, flooding their blood with oxygen. Then they would exhale completely and allow their lungs to collapse safely. This granted them up to 15 minutes of survival time in space. The display showed technical diagrams of human modifications and survival techniques. Engineer Price had been using this technique to manually repair damaged ships during combat. While our engineers worked safely inside pressurized suits, human engineers worked directly in vacuum, moving faster and completing repairs that should have been impossible. The old warrior began pacing across the platform. But individual modifications were not the most disturbing aspect of human space tactics. The hologram changed to show a massive battle scene with hundreds of ships engaged in combat. The most terrifying moment came when Admiral Thorne decided to use his shipyard workers as soldiers, Zargon said. These were not trained Marines, they were welders, mechanics, and construction workers. Yet they knew the ships intimately. The display showed human civilian spacecraft being converted into weapons platforms in real time. Human workers dismantled their own construction equipment and transformed it into weapons. Welding torches became cutting beams. Construction robots became boarding drones. Cargo haulers became missile platforms. A cadet with purple fur looked amazed. They built weapons during the battle? Not just weapons, Zargon replied. Humans forged entirely new types of spacecraft we had never witnessed, vessels designed specifically to fight within Jupiter's gravity well and magnetic field. The hologram showed strange human ships that seemed to dance through space, employing Jupiter's own environment as a weapon. The turning point came when Engineer Price volunteered for what humans called a suicide mission, Zargon continued. Our flagship possessed heavy shields that our own weapons could not penetrate. Price resolved to deliver a fusion bomb directly to our engine core. The display showed a small human figure in a basic spacesuit propelling a large device through the void between ships. She launched herself from a damaged human cruiser with nothing but a thruster pack and a personal shield. Our point defense system should have incinerated her instantly. Instead, she used pieces of destroyed ships as cover, ricocheting from debris to debris. The hologram tracked Price's impossible journey through the battle zone, evading weapon fire and utilizing wreckage as stepping stones.
When she reached our ship, she had been in vacuum for almost 10 minutes, Zargon continued.
Her oxygen was depleted, her skin frozen, and she was barely conscious. Any other species would have perished. The old warrior stopped pacing and faced his audience. Instead, she manually welded the fusion device to our engine housing and activated the timer. The display showed a massive explosion that tore through the heart of the Vuldarian flagship. Our ship was crippled, our command structure annihilated, Zargon said. But that was not the end of Engineer Price's mission. Several cadets leaned forward, baffled as to how anyone could survive such an explosion. Price had calculated the blast pattern perfectly, Zargon explained. She positioned herself in a debris shadow that shielded her from the worst of the explosion. When the blast wave struck, it launched her toward the nearest human ship like a projectile. The hologram showed Price's unconscious form spinning through space, propelled by the very explosion she had caused. Human rescue teams recovered her 40 minutes after she had first entered vacuum, Zargon said. She had third-degree burns, severe decompression injuries, and permanent damage to her nervous system. But she was alive. A human cadet in the front row quietly asked, "What happened to her, sir?" She endured 6 months of medical recovery. Then she returned to duty, helping to design the human military's first dedicated space marine units. Her vacuum survival techniques became standard training for all human space forces. The old warrior turned off the holographic display and looked around the room. The Battle of Jupiter taught us that humans do not merely adapt to harsh environments, Zargon said. They reforge themselves to master those environments. They transform the vacuum of space into an ally, gravity into a weapon, and their own bodies into instruments of war. Zargon gathered his materials slowly. Other species construct ships to shelter them from the perils of space. Humans engineer vessels to help them embrace those perils. They do not fear the void. They make the void fear them. A cadet with golden scales raised her hand. "Sir, are humans still modifying themselves for combat?" "The war concluded before such modifications became widespread," Zargon replied. "But the techniques persist. Human space marines still train for vacuum operations. They continue to push the limits of their physical endurance." The old warrior moved toward the door, then paused. "Tomorrow I will tell you the final story, about General Vivian Hayes and the last battle of the war. You will learn why the Vuldarian Dominion surrendered, and why we now serve alongside humans instead of fighting against them." As the cadets filed out, many gazed upward, as if seeing space for the first time. They had learned that the empty void between stars was not empty at all. It was teeming with humans who had learned to make it their home. Zargon remained behind, reviewing his notes for tomorrow's concluding lesson. The hardest story lay ahead, the one that still evoked his deepest nightmares, the story of what humans truly are.
On the 5th and final day, the Grand Hall was completely full. Word of Zargon's stories had permeated the entire academy. Cadets from other classes had arrived to hear the concluding tale. Even some instructors sat in the back rows, listening intently to narratives they had never encountered. Zargon entered the room and observed the eager crowd. His old wounds ached more than usual today. The final story was always the most arduous to tell, for it unveiled the true cost of human victory. It revealed what humans were willing to sacrifice when everything they cherished was imperiled. Today I will tell you about General Vivian Hayes and the last battle of the war, Zargon began, his voice softer, heavier than usual. This story will show you why the Voldarian Dominion surrendered and why we now fight alongside humans instead of against them. The holographic display activated, showing Earth's solar system. The blue planet hung peacefully in space, encircled by its silver moon and the bustling traffic of human civilization. By the final year of the war, the Voldarian Dominion was desperate. Human tactics had spread throughout the galaxy. Other species were learning to fight like humans. Our military advantage was eroding. The display zoomed out to show massive fleets gathering at the solar system's edge. Thousands of Voldarian ships surrounded Earth like an angry swarm. The High Command decided to end the war with one decisive strike. They amassed every remaining ship, every soldier, every weapon in the Dominion. The plan was simple: obliterate Earth and crush human morale forever. A cadet with blue scales raised her hand. "Sir, how many ships did the Voldarian Dominion have?" 12,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The humans possessed perhaps 3,000 ships to defend their home system. The hologram showed the tactical situation. Human forces were scattered throughout the solar system, vastly outnumbered by the approaching enemy fleet. General Vivian Hayes commanded the human defense. She was Earth's most seasoned military leader, a woman who had fought in every major engagement of the war. But even she knew that conventional tactics could not save Earth. The display focused on a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She looked like someone who had seen too much war, burdened by immense responsibility. For 3 days, the human fleet fought desperately to stem our advance. They employed every trick, every tactic learned during the war, but our numbers were overwhelming. Slowly, our forces pressed closer to Earth. The hologram depicted the running battle, with human ships retreating toward their home planet while sustaining heavy casualties. On the 4th day, General Hayes made a decision that still haunts my dreams. She resolved to use Earth's moon as a weapon. Several cadets gasped. A young alien with tentacles asked, "Sir, what do you mean?"
"I mean exactly that," Zargon replied. General Hayes ordered the installation of massive fusion engines on the moon's surface. Her plan was to launch Earth's moon at our fleet like a colossal projectile. The display showed the technical details of the plan: enormous engines being constructed on the lunar surface, calculations for trajectory and impact velocity. The moon was home to 50 million human colonists, Zargon explained. Research stations, mining operations, entire cities built inside its craters and caves. It was humanity's first major colony beyond Earth. A human cadet in the front row looked horrified. "Sir, what happened to all those people?" Zargon's compound eyes reflected the light from the display. General Hayes ordered the exhalation of immediately. Every available ship was dispatched to evacuate the lunar colonies, but there were only enough ships to save half the population. The hologram showed the frantic evacuation efforts, thousands of ships shuttling between Earth and the moon, carrying as many people as possible. 25 million people could be saved. 25 million would have to remain behind to operate the engines and guide the moon's trajectory. Without them, the weapon would miss our fleet and accomplish nothing. The old warrior began pacing slowly across the platform. This is when I learned what human sacrifice truly signified. The display showed volunteers lining up at military recruitment centers on the moon. Not merely soldiers, but civilians, families, children old enough to operate the controls. Colonel Marcus Green volunteered to lead the lunar garrison. He was 45 years old, with 3 children and a wife awaiting him on Earth. When asked why he volunteered, he simply said, "Someone has to stay. It might as well be me." The hologram focused on a human man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He was embracing his family goodbye at a spaceport. 20,000 other humans made the same choice, Zargon continued. Teachers, engineers, doctors, farmers, people who could have escaped yet chose to stay and perish for their species. A cadet with purple fur asked shakily, "Sir, how could they make such a choice?" "Because they comprehended something that most species do not. Sometimes the only way to safeguard what you cherish is to sacrifice everything you possess." The display showed the final preparations, human families bidding farewell, knowing they would never see each other again. I was aboard the Voldarian flagship when our sensors detected the humans' actions. Our admiral scoffed. He declared humans so desperate they would destroy their own moon. He believed it proved our inevitable victory. The hologram showed the massive Voldarian fleet continuing its advance toward Earth, oblivious to the activity on the moon. Then the engines fired, Zargon stated simply. The display showed Earth's moon beginning to move, slowly at first, then accelerating as the fusion engines reached full power. It took 6 hours for the moon to reach our fleet, 6 hours during which 25 million humans collaborated to steer their home toward our ships. They transmitted messages to Earth during those final hours. The old warrior stopped pacing and faced his audience.
Colonel Green's final transmission was broadcast to the entire human fleet. He said, "Tell our children that we were not afraid. Tell them we chose this freely. Tell them that love is stronger than death." Several cadets were crying now, both human and alien. The emotional weight of the story was overwhelming. "The moon struck our fleet at 1/10 the speed of light," Zargon said. "The impact instantly destroyed 8,000 ships. The expanding debris field annihilated another 3,000. In one single moment, 11,000 years of Voldarian naval power ceased to exist." The hologram showed the incomprehensible destruction. Where the largest fleet in galactic history once stood, now only expanding debris and radiation remained. "I survived because my ship was at the formation's edge," Zargon explained. "We were damaged but intact." As we witnessed the devastation, our admiral received a message from General Hayes. The display showed the human general's face, streaked with tears but utterly resolved. She declared, "The moon you just saw perish was home to 50 million of our people. 25 million of them chose to die rather than let you destroy Earth. This is what human love looks like. This is what human sacrifice means. Do you wish to witness what we will do next?" Zargon's voice broke slightly as he continued. Our admiral surveyed the destruction around him and realized he was not fighting an enemy. He was fighting an idea. The idea that some things are worth any price, any sacrifice, any loss. The hologram showed the Voldarian ships powering down their weapons and transmitting surrender signals. The war concluded that day, not because we were militarily incapable of continuing,
but because we finally understood what we were fighting against. We were fighting a species that would sacrifice their own moon, their own people, their own history to protect what they loved. The old warrior turned off the display and looked around the room at the silent cadets. General Hayes could have used Earth itself as a weapon. She could have obliterated our entire fleet and every planet in the Vuldarian Dominion. Instead, she chose to sacrifice only what was necessary to end the war. A cadet asked, "What happened to her?" She retired from military service immediately after the war. She dedicated the remainder of her life to aiding war refugees, both human and alien. She stated she had witnessed enough death and desired to spend her remaining years preserving life. Zargon gathered his materials slowly. This is why humans are our allies now, rather than our enemies. Not because we fear their weapons or their tactics, but because we understand their hearts. They fight not for conquest or glory, but for love. The old warrior moved toward the door, then paused. You are the future defenders of this galaxy. Some of you will serve alongside humans. Some of you will lead them. All of you must comprehend what you have learned here. Humans are not monsters. They are not supernatural beings. They are people who love so profoundly that they will become anything, sacrifice anything, endure anything to protect what matters to them. Zargon walked toward the exit, his forelegs carrying him slowly but steadily. The galaxy is safer because humans fight for it. But more importantly, the galaxy is better because humans love it. As the old warrior left the grand hall, the cadets sat in complete silence. They had learned about tactics and weapons, about psychology and sacrifice, but most importantly, they had learned about the overwhelming power of love.